Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook and today in Pod 17 I'll be looking at a result of Manchester City by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you an exclusive interview with Alan Pardew and James Tompkins after the game. So let's begin. In memory of the Croydon 7, our lost friends, who sadly lost their lives in the Croydon tram crash 2 weeks ago, you will never be forgotten. This week's intro, Here's to You, is dedicated to them. Palace's nemesis, Yaya Toure, came back to haunt the Eagles once again as he scored a brace to clinch the win for Manchester City at Selhurst Park. The midfielder was handed a first Premier League start by Pep Guardiola for the game, and he responded by bagging a brace, including the winner 7 minutes from time after Wickham had pulled Palace back level. However, the defeat was Palace's 5th in a row as they ended up without a result again, despite another encouraging display. They had begun brightly and restricted City's attendance of attacking riches to no attempts during the first half an hour, and while Alan Pardew's men couldn't create an opportunity of their own, they still enjoyed plenty of possession in the visitors' half and made more of that by holding their own in the opening stages. City were then dealt a blow when skipper Vincent Kompany was forced off after a collision with Claudio Bravo left him with a head injury, but despite the setback they converted the game's first real chance on 39 minutes when a familiar foe came back to haunt the Eagles. Making his first league start of the season, Toure had time and space on the edge of the area and played the ball into Nolito, who teed him back up to rifle the shot and ball past Hennessy via a slight deflection and net his comeback following a pre-season disagreement with Guardiola. A quiet first half gave way to a much more entertaining second period, and 10 minutes after the restart, Palace nearly managed to draw level. Some silky wing play by Wilfried Zaha allowed the wide men to beat 2 players and pick out Jason Puncheon, who drove to the touchline and stood up across for Christian Benteke to attack. His header was saved at point-blank range by Bravo, with Zaha seeing his follow-up deflect wide. The Belgian then got off an end of a subsequent corner kick, but once again saw his effort scrambled away. But suddenly the chances were coming thick and fast, as Sergio Aguero and Kevin De Bruyne blazed over the crossbar when well played. But the game changed in a blink of an eye on 65 minutes as City nearly scored, but Palace did. A sweeping move by Aguero laid the ball off to De Bruyne, who sped up down the right and flashed a cross into the area where the Argentinian hitman managed to divert it goalwards, and after Hennessy on the occasion of his 50th Palace appearance made a good save, Joe Ward swept the danger off his line with Raheem Sterling ready to pounce. The ball then found its way to James McArthur, who played it to Zaha on the right, and he passed the ball to Wickham. The striker managed to get past Zabaleta and then hammered a fierce strike that Bravo could only get toe-to-toe, which did nothing to stop it finding net as the striker celebrated scoring in successive games. It looked as though Palace were going to grab a deserved point, but on 83 minutes City found a way to get back in front. A low corner by Kevin De Bruyne caught Palace out, and after it crept past the front post, Toure was able to tap the ball in and score his 6th in 6 games against the Eagles. There was one final opportunity for Palace's side to snatch a draw when the mesmerising Zaha ghosted down the right and picked out Jason Puncheon in the box, but his first time shot drifted just wide of the far post with Bravo scrambling, as City left South London with all the points. Crystal Palace's 2-1 defeat to Manchester City on Saturday wasn't a bad performance, but it was another one losing thanks to basic defensive errors. While City have so much more quality, that was matched in work rate by Crystal Palace. Now for some positives from the game. The drubbing that home fans expected didn't materialise, and Palace kept themselves in the game for most of the 90 minutes. Yohan Cabaye, Wilfried Zaha and Jason Puncheon all played a positive role attacking and defensively. Now for some negatives from the game. Defensive errors. City's first goal came from them taking advantage of Palace trying to be too clever, whilst the second goal came from a complete lack of organisation in the build-up from a corner. Alan Pardew says conceding from set pieces isn't us, but given the way that Palace have conceded goals this season, it's the club's greatest weakness. Crystal Palace's poor run of form continued with a fifth defeat in a row on Saturday as they lost out at home to Manchester City despite a good performance. It looked like it was going to be another frustrating afternoon for Crystal Palace after falling behind to Yaya Touré's strike in the first half, but the Eagles had more than matched their opponents, but Palace fought back in the second half and deservedly took the lead through Connor Wickham. However, the Eagles were stunned as Yaya Touré tapped home a second goal from Kevin De Bruyne's corner into the middle of the box inside the last 10 minutes of the game to win it for the visitors. So what do we learn from the game? Here are 5 things we picked up. Number 1. Defensive frailties on show again. Crystal Palace have talked about cutting out the errors at the back, but there were a couple more in the build-up to City's first goal. Receiving the ball, Andros Townsend played it behind to Martin Kelly, who slipped and in an attempt to clear the ball, passed it straight to Kevin De Bruyne, and City moved it wide well before Yaya Touré fired home via a deflection. With Palace not getting close to City's players in the box, it wasn't much better for the second goal either, as Palace seemed to switch off, allowing Touré to take advantage once again from the corner as there was no one on the back post. Number 2. Set pieces must be better. Crystal Palace got themselves into a number of good positions and had the chance to deliver the ball and cause problems at set pieces, but time and time again the delivery was poor and they failed to make the chances pay, with City punishing them with theirs. Number 3. Winging it. Crystal Palace caused problems down the wings once again, whether it was Wilfried Zaha down the right or Jason Puncheon in the second half down the left. They got balls into good areas and deservedly equalised in the second half, with Zaha providing his 5th assist of the season, the most of any English player in the league. Number 4. Fine margins. It was so close to being 2-0 at one end when Joe Ward superbly cleared off the line for Palace after Wayne Hennessy got a hand to the goal-bound shot from Sergio Aguero, and within 60 seconds the Eagles were level, thanks to Connor Wickham's first Premier League goal at Selhurst Park. But once again Palace were left to rule another late goal as City took all 3 points with Touré's second goal, with only their second of 4 shots on target in the whole game. And number 5. Wickham loves playing against City. The former Sunderland striker netted his 4th goal against City when he fired home in the second half to draw Palace level. It was his first goal for Palace against City, having scored all 3 of his previous goals against City in the Premier League for Sunderland. But it now means he has scored more goals against the blue side of Manchester than any other top-flight side. And having an impact in both of his last 2 substitute appearances, he will surely now be pushing for the starting berth. So now you've heard the match review, we're now going to move on to the player rankings. But before we start with that, don't forget to follow us across social media on Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest news. And for all you Facebook users out there, don't forget to check out our Facebook group so you can join in the latest discussions, read the latest news and post your own opinion. So like I said there, if you do want to get in contact with us and you are on social media, then of course do follow us on both Twitter and Facebook with or using the @ which is at Crystal Palace. And obviously if you are on Facebook, which I know quite a lot of people are, then I would highly recommend you do join the Facebook group, because on there's a lot of discussion after games, because people and fans go on there and post their own opinion. And obviously on all of the accounts, Twitter and Facebook, you can read the latest news. So if you do want to keep up to date with the the recent ongoings with the club, whether it be players, whether it be managerial, whether it be anything else to do about the club, news regarding the club, then obviously do go follow our accounts. And like I said already, both on Twitter and Facebook, you can find it at Crystal Palace. And obviously the last few weeks I've set a challenge to the listeners to see whether anyone could, write in the comments below on the YouTube video them or their player rankings. And obviously every week I give you my player rankings, obviously giving each of the players a 1 to 10 for their rating or for their performances, and then go and just explain their performance. And I want you guys in the comments below to do the same. So if you want to go below the video in the comments, get all of the 11 starting players, giving them ratings from 1 to 10. And obviously if you want to do the subs as well, you can do that, and then that way I can see your ratings and then we can compare each other's to see how our opinion is similar and see whether we had a similar perspective of the game. And that's a good thing, because quite a few people have done it in the last few weeks, and we can see how people's opinions have differed about how different players have performed. And there was one question I had last week, which I'll go on to discuss later on in the podcast, which a listener did actually answer, and that was whether Connor Wickham could form a partnership in a 4-4-2, let's say, with Christian Benteke. And there was one listener who did obviously comment that answering my question. So if you do want to go back on the last video, pod 16 I believe it was, you can go on there and see his opinion. But obviously enough of that. Like I said, if you do want to follow us, then follow us on both Twitter and Facebook. And obviously, if you do want to share your opinion on the game, or whether it's just the player rankings, then go ahead and drop a comment below the video. Obviously, we're going to start in goal today. Obviously, Steve Mandanda got injured on international duty, which meant Wayne Hennessy came back into the squad, who I'm going to give a 6. There was absolutely nothing he could do about Yaya Touré's first goal after it took a significant deflection, but questions will be asked about the way he was dragged to his far post for the second. An excellent second half save, which was needed to clear off the line by Joe Ward, which kept Palace in the fight too. He had no chance with the goals from Yaya Touré. He would expect to keep his place away at Swansea, and we do too. So obviously Wayne Hennessy here, like I touched on at the beginning, he came in for the injured Steve Mandanda. And obviously recently Steve Mandanda hasn't really been performing well. Yes, he's made some crucial saves throughout the game, but his performance has dropped slightly considering how well he was playing the first few games. So this is a chance for Wayne Hennessy to come back into the squad and try and earn his place back. And I did say at the end here, you know, Steve Mandanda, even if he does come back from injury, you know, he probably will be unfit, which means that Hennessy will probably get the go-ahead. And I think, you know, he'll expect to keep his place, and to be honest, I think he should keep his place, because in this game he did show glimpses of the qualities he's got, but once again there was some disadvantages or some bad things about his performance. But obviously, touching on Yaya Touré's goal, yes, we've lost another game, yes, we conceded another 2 goals, but you know, Wayne Hennessy really couldn't do anything about that, and you can't really put him to blame. The first goal, the defenders should have been marking the players more closely, Yaya Touré being the main person they should have been marking, and you know, it was a deflection, so it's quite unlucky. And if you look back at a replay, if it hadn't have taken the deflection, it either would have gone, depending on which way the wind is, because you can't see the wind in the video, but it probably would have either gone to the left of the post or it would have gone over. So it was quite unlucky there with the fact that there was a deflection. But like I said at the beginning, if the defenders had been marking him more closely, there would have been less pressure on Hennessy. And looking back at the goal, if Hennessy had had one step to the right, he probably would have been able to save it. But obviously, where he wasn't expecting Yaya Touré to shoot that, because he would have expected his defenders to be tight, it meant that he was a bit confused and wasn't able to, you know, get up and save it. And obviously, the second goal, very bad defending from Palace once again. Nothing really Wayne Hennessy's fault for. And a thing to highlight, which quite a few people have highlighted on social media, so once again, if you do want to share your opinion, social media is the way forward. They said that if you look back at the replay, Wayne Hennessy is pointing for someone to go at the far post where we conceded a goal from. So if people had decided, the defenders decided to listen to Wayne Hennessy and go on the back post, we probably wouldn't have conceded that goal, because there would have been someone on the back post and someone more closely marking Yaya Touré. But once again, like I said, Wayne Hennessy, you couldn't really put him at fault for that, because he still managed to, you know, go to the area where the ball was coming in. He was unlucky not to, you know, parry the ball away, just missed the ball slightly. It went across the face of goal, and obviously Yaya Touré was the first there, and you know, he managed to put it in. And obviously, yes, criticism away, he made an excellent save in the second half to keep Palace in the game. Obviously, I think it's De Bruyne put the ball into Aguero. Wayne Hennessy managed to get down, quite good reflexes, parry the ball away. It was just about to roll back in with, I believe it was Sterling, or De Bruyne was on the end of it. He went to go and hit it back in, and Joe Ward was able to clear it. So the fact that he was able to create that save, the fact that he got down to save the shot, and then you know, Joe Ward cleared it, just shows how good he was in the game. And obviously, like I said, no chance with the goals from Yaya Touré. And I think, you know, people may say he thought we had a bad game, but then at the end of the day, if you're on a losing streak and defenders are conceding, or goalkeepers are conceding goals, you're going to think they had a bad performance. But generally, the reason I've given him a 6 is you can't put him at fault for any of the goals. And also, he made that excellent save in the second half, which ultimately did set up our counter-attack, which we scored from. But, you know, a good performance for Wayne Hennessy. And like I said at the beginning, I do expect him to keep his place for the game against Swansea. Obviously, moving on to Joe Ward, who I'm going to give a 5. Did a decent job against Nolito throughout the match, and his goal line clearance kept Palace in the game. A steady game overall. Nothing spectacular, but he wasn't really at fault for much. So obviously, Joe Ward here, the reason I've given him a 5 is not because he done anything wrong, but it's just the fact that he didn't really have that much to do. He wasn't at fault for anything, but he didn't really have that much impact on the game. And obviously, he did a decent job. Nolito is quite a good player. He's shown that this season, coming to Manchester City, he's been one of their standout players. But Joe Ward did a pretty alright job at defending him, marking him, and making sure that he had as little chances as he did. And throughout the game, you know, he didn't really do anything spectacular, but I suppose we could call it a steady game, because, you know, he was able to get the balance right between attacking and defending, and ultimately that goal line clearance was absolutely fantastic as well. And that goal line clearance is, you know, I could have given him a 6 for that, because, you know, that was the thing that kept us in the game. But, you know, it was an under par performance from Joe Ward, which is, you know, we normally expect him to do better, but in this game he didn't really do that. But like I said again, you know, he was fantastic against Nolito. Nolito, one of these informed players in the Premier League, but once again, Joe Ward was able to do a decent job of him throughout the game. And I think the word to describe it, or the phrase, is a steady game, because, you know, like I said already, a steady game. He managed to get the balance right. He didn't really lose any momentum throughout the game and was constantly going until the end. And he was quite crucial, like I said, the goal line clearance, but also setting up the counter-attack which Palace scored from. But obviously the reason I've given him a 5 is not because he had a bad performance, just for the fact that we know what he can do, and it was a slightly under par performance. Obviously moving on to the centre-back, James Tompkins, who I'm going to give a 5. As with Ward, did a good job of keeping Sergio Aguero and Kevin De Bruyne at bay for most of the match. Nearly managed to get a full block on Touré's opener, but the shot just took a deflection off him and in. Apart from that, he done well against Sergio Aguero and looked comfortable on the ball. So obviously, as with Joe Ward, it was a slightly under par performance from James Tompkins. But in saying that, yes, he didn't really have the best game defensively, and the defence as a whole didn't really have a good game. But he did do quite a good job at keeping De Bruyne and Sergio Aguero at bay. And to be honest, I must highlight, these are probably the best cam, or the best cam and the best striker in the league. And the fact that James Tompkins and Scott Dan, for that respect, managed to keep these guys at bay just shows how much of a good game he had. And obviously, he kept them at bay for most of the game. So obviously, when we scored, players weren't really marking them close enough, which meant they could score. But other than the sort of mistakes we made for the goals, it was an alright, decent performance. And obviously, he nearly managed to get a block on Touré's opener, so I did touch on that when Hennessy, you know, Hennessy didn't know the ball was coming, because he would have expected a player to be closely marking Touré. Obviously, you know, Tompkins wasn't the man marking Touré, but he did manage to get a slight block on Touré's opener. And like I said at the beginning, it was either probably going just wide of the post or over the post, but, you know, that slight deflection meant it went in the top corner. But, you know, at least he, you know, put his leg out, tried to be brave, and tried to block it. And obviously, you know, the shot took a deflection, so you can't really fault him for that. But apart from that, same with Ward. He done very well against Sergio Aguero, who is probably one of the most informed players, maybe, let's say, in the Premier League at the minute, and probably one of the better strikers. And the one thing I do like with James Tompkins, the way he plays, apart, which makes him sort of upper in my rankings, let's say, from Damien Delaney, is the fact that he has better distribution. And throughout this game, he did look quite comfortable on the ball, so he didn't lose possession when he was under pressure. He was good at, you know, passing the ball back, trying to build up the play from the back, which is what you expect from a defender. So although he didn't really have that much of a good game, he wasn't very effective defensively. When he did have the ball, he wasn't really put under pressure, and like I said, he was comfortable on the ball. But, you know, in a summary, you know, as with Ward, a very under par performance from him. He did do well at keeping the most in form and the best strikers and cams. You know, he done well at keeping them at bay. And he did get a block on Touré's shot, which did go in. So all in all, I think a 5's a fair result for him. Obviously, moving on to the captain, Scott Dan, who I'm going to give a 5. He didn't have any chances to score from a set piece, but he wasn't really troubled by City's attack too often. Whilst Palace's centre-back pairing weren't directly responsible for City's second goal, the lack of organisation and communication at set pieces does fall on experienced defenders, and that was completely lacking throughout the match. The skipper was vocal, as you would expect. So obviously, I'm going to be repeating myself quite a lot, because most of the backline had a very under-par performance, and Scott Dan is a clear example of that. And we know he's very good at, you know, attacking set pieces, and in this game, and you probably heard it in the negative parts a few sections ago in the podcast, we weren't very good at these set pieces. You know, we kept putting them into whether it would be the City wall, or we couldn't get the ball high enough so someone like Dan could get a head on it. And obviously, Scott Dan, we know he's an aerial threat, but in this game, he didn't really have the chance to score from a set piece. But in saying that, City's attack, much like Tompkins, it didn't really affect him too much. He wasn't really troubled by it. And whilst, you know, you would expect that the centre-backs would be responsible for conceding 2 goals, if you look back at the replays, it wasn't really their fault, because other players in the midfield who were tracking back should have been marking the players quite closely. But that moves me on to the second goal, which you could say was the defender's fault. And, you know, when a corner comes in straight across the floor, or straight across the ground from the byline, you could say it's the defender's fault. And, you know, it did show in this game a little lack of organisation and maybe a bit of communication at the set piece. The fact that we didn't have a person on the back post, the fact that we didn't block that shot that was coming in. So, you know, you would expect a player who, like Scott Dan, like Tompkins, who've played in the Premier League for quite a few years, you would expect them to do it. And that sort of experience and organisation, a little bit of communication was lacking throughout the game. But you know, Scott Dann, as the captain, you could expect him to be vocal, and in this game, classic example, once again, commanding everyone, making sure everyone knew what they had to do. And although he didn't have any chances himself, he didn't really do anything fantastic, he still commanded the sides as you would have expected him. And I'll go on to talk about, after Martin Kelly, just a summary of the defence. And although I've given them 5s and 4s, you look back at the defence, it's significantly better than in past weeks. And Scott Dann is a classic example of that. He finally come back after the international break, finally sort of gained his fitness back from after his injury, and ultimately had a better performance. But in a summary, he didn't really have any set-piece chances to score because the set-piece delivery wasn't very good. And you can't really blame him, like Tompkins, like Ward, you can't really blame them for the goals because they weren't directly responsible for them, because, you know, they were players who should have been marking them better. And obviously, in the defence as a whole, it's not really specific to Scott Dann, but organisation and communication does really need to improve in the next few games, because we need to make sure that when we have a set piece, we've got someone on the back post, we get the organisation right, and the communication is making sure that people are marking players in and around the box. But once again, Scott Dann, a 5, I think is a fair result considering his performance. But, you know, as normal, a very vocal performance. Obviously, Martin Kelly, a 4. He did get slated quite a lot on Twitter, and I'm not really going to go into too much detail about him because, you know, I've said it already. I'm going to repeat quite a lot of stuff about the defensive players because they had very similar under-par performances. But Martin Kelly, a 4. As a predominantly right-footed player, Kelly isn't really the ideal candidate to play on the left. He struggled throughout the match under pressure from Raheem Sterling, and partly responsible for the first goal. It was also his failure to shield the ball away from play, opting instead to clear it for a corner, that gave Manchester City the corner that they scored from. So obviously Martin Kelly here, we know he's a right-footed player, and we've discussed this in weeks gone by. You know, he's playing on the left, and we can clearly see, week in, week out, watching the game, that it isn't right. And in past games, like last week especially, he was moved to the right and he had a significantly better performance. But in this game, Pardew decided to carry on playing him on the right, and once again, continuing playing him on the left, and once again he showed that why he isn't capable of playing that in that position, because, you know, the formation we're playing, or the sort of way we're playing, the style, means that the fullbacks need to push up. But when you've got someone who's right-footed playing on the left, that doesn't really work, because they're not able to get crosses into the area because they're playing on their weaker foot. And he did struggle quite a lot under pressure from the likes of Raheem Sterling, because, you know, Raheem Sterling is a very fast player, and I'm not basing this just on FIFA stats, but seriously, if you look at their 2 cards, Raheem Sterling is significantly faster than Martin Kelly, and that showed throughout the game. You know, his dribbling was so much better. Raheem Sterling managed to get past him, use his pace to get past Kelly on a few occasions, you know, that led to us, you know, losing possession and when we were under pressure. And obviously, I've talked about the defence not really being responsible for the goals, but obviously Martin Kelly, I can put him responsible for the first goal. You know, instead of trying to clear the ball, he tried to dribble the ball from the pass from Andros Townsend, which admittedly it was a very bad pass in the fact that he put him under pressure, but that alone, it was a very bad pass. He should have, or instead of dribbling where the grass is wet, where it's been raining, he should have just lobbed it off the pitch so the players could push up and maybe start up a counter attack, but that way we relieve the pressure. But, you know, he is responsible for that goal, for not clearing the ball and giving it away straight to Kevin De Bruyne. And also, we can blame him on the second goal, which I'm not really going to blame him too hardly on, because I think it was just the defensive organisation as a whole which let us down. But from the corner, he shielded the ball, so he tried to defend Raheem Sterling. In this occasion, he did do it, but the fact that he didn't shield the ball properly meant that he kicked it out of play, which gave City the corner, which they ultimately scored from. So if he had done better with the ball, maybe shielding the ball so Raheem Sterling had kicked it out, or maybe if he had just put it out for a throw, maybe there would have been a different outcome and people wouldn't be blaming him as much for the goal. And like I've said already, just to sort of summarise it, a 4. The reason I've given him a 4, because it was a very, very under par performance, which you can actually, I can sympathise with him, because at the end of the day, he's a right-footed player playing on the left, and that really isn't fitting his style, and that meant that he was significantly weaker. And a classic example of that is when he had to try and clear the ball when he was under pressure, he couldn't really do that because it was on his weak foot. But, you know, unlike all of the other defenders, he was significantly struggled more with the pressure from Manchester City, whereas the other players used their experience to sort of overcome that. But certainly, we could blame Martin Kelly for both of the goals, but I'm not really going to dig into him too much, because other than that sort of goal the goal he gave away, he didn't really do nothing else of note. And obviously now I'm going to move on to the midfield three. And you know, the last few weeks I've discussed the formation, and in this game sort of a change of formation again, which ultimately led to us quite dominating for quite parts of the game. And ultimately some parts of the game we were actually even better than Manchester City, and that just meant, you know, that should have meant that we should have got something from the game, because we showed how we can, you know, be at their level. But ultimately we didn't overall. And obviously once again the 4-3-3 formation, just to go over sort of the main three things, main three bullet points which it helps us with the formation. Obviously it gives the defence more cover, so in the midfield three you've got maybe one defensive midfielder, two attacking midfielders, so they interchange roles throughout the game. With that, just one player standing in front of the back four, just to give them a little bit of cover, so getting tackles in before the, you know, they've got to try and beat the last man, things like that. And ultimately that led to us having quite good defensive organisation throughout the game, because whenever City were on the counter-attack, other than the times they scored, you know, we defended that quite well. And obviously moving on to the midfield, they get better supply of the ball. So recently, if you look at our stats, and I know people say stats lie or stats don't lie, whatever way you look at it, you know, the last few weeks, this season in general, we've had a lot more possession, and the fact that we have better supply for the ball, so the midfield three, they have a lot more of the ball, a better supply of the ball from the defenders, and ultimately that leads to us having a better control of the game. And obviously because they have a lot of control of the game, a lot of possession, that leads on to my final bullet point, which is it gives better service to the attackers. So if you've got midfielders who have the ball, it means that they're able to supply the defence, or they're able to supply the attackers better. And you know, I think one person to highlight, or two people, Jason Punch and Johan Kabay, classic examples of how having the ball and giving supply to the attackers can actually help us, because these guys, you know, they were constantly trying to find the attackers, obviously the striker and the two wingers, and ultimately that led to us having quite a very good dominant attacking play. So if you do want to drop a comment below the video on what you think of the 4-3-3 formation, or maybe another formation which you think Palace should play which could benefit us more in the long run. But obviously going to move on to the first player in our midfield three, which is Jason Puncheon, who I'm going to give an 8. Whether he's played on the left or in the centre, Puncheon gave Palace a focal point and a cruciality and outlet. He isn't always rated for his ball retention, but he does so well, especially when under pressure. Came back on many occasions to defend. He was very good on the ball. He also showed some fine trickery in the danger area to get some dangerous deliveries and crosses in. So obviously Jason Puncheon here, I've given him an 8, so as you can see already, he's one of the better players from this game. And to be honest, through this game he did change sides, or change sort of position quite a lot. So for the majority of the game he was playing quite central, which meant he was playing in the midfield three. But in the second half we sort of had a formation change with Wickham coming on, which meant that he went out onto the left hand side, and ultimately it didn't really change the way he had, or his performance. Obviously he was the focal point for Palace's attack and probably the best attacking player. The fact that all of our balls from the defence or defensive midfielder came through him, and he would try and supply the ball, so he was the focal point of our attack. He was the person controlling the play, doing things like that, and he was crucially an outlet. You know, we know how good of a an outlet he is to the side. We know how crucial he is to the way we play, and this game showed us, you know, we know that what skills he's got, you know, attacking and defensively. And in this game he showed his attributes once again, you know, going back on a few occasions to defend, and also he was very good going forward. So he's just showing the different sort of outlet and skills he's got with his game. And ultimately in this game it was a perfect example of showing how he can use his different skills to influence the game. And obviously last season he wasn't really rated for his ball retention, so obviously he gave away possession quite easily, and he done it the first few games of the season. He was giving the ball away too much, and his ball retention, so keeping hold of the ball, wasn't very good. But in this game, especially when he was under pressure, you know, players running at him, trying to tackle him, he held up the ball quite well. And then after that, whether it be he run past the player or find a pass, so he was able to do something with that when he was under pressure. And you know, we've talked about how the defence was very bad, but in this game with the midfield three, it meant that Jason Puncheon at times was playing defensive, and he, you know, a few occasions he got back to defend, you know, made a crucial tackle in the second half, I believe it was against Raheem Sterling. He was going to go cut inside, maybe put a cross in for Aguero, who was in the box, but you know, Puncheon came back, defend, run into the box and made a tackle. So just showing how, like, once again, like I said, the outlet he is to the side, the fact that he's got his attacking attributes, but also he's got defending attributes, which meant that on that occasion he could defend the threat. And obviously he was very good on the ball as well. I've said about this, he can dictate the way we play. You know, he can slow the game down, he can you know, pick the pace up of the game, and also where he's, you know, good on the ball. He's able to find a lovely cross, and in the second half he run straight down to the byline from a pass from Zaha, whipped the ball into the area, and Benteke headed it down, and Bravo made a fantastic world-class save. So just showing how good he is on the ball. And he did have a bit of trickery. He isn't really the most skillful player, and once again, relating back to FIFA, he's probably got like a 3-star. Do comment below if I've got this wrong, but in this game he showed a bit more trickery, you know, to try and get past players, get the ball into the area, and also, you know, crossing as well. You know, it's quite tricky to cross the ball in, but if you can trick players by making them think you're gonna pass it back and you're actually going to cross, that takes a bit of skill. And he got the ball into, like I said already, danger area. So his crosses coming in, very nice, dangerous crosses into the area. And a few occasions, the likes of Benteke got their head on it and, you know, created some chances for us. And that's what we need. We need players like him and Zaha, Townsend, putting in these dangerous crosses, so it puts the other team under pressure, which means they have to defend well. But obviously Jason Puncheon, you know, the reason I've given him an 8 is because overall he was a fantastic player in the game. He was the most attacking threat throughout the game, and whether he was on the left or the centre, he had a massive influence on the game. And like I've said already, he was the focal point of the attack, and also his defensive outlet on the game was absolutely crucial as well. And I must say, he is a high contender for the Man of the Match award. Obviously moving on to James McArthur, who I'm going to give a 7. His hesitancy for the first goal, where a clearance would have been sufficed, but he instead was caught in possession, was the low point of his performance. He helped to keep Pep Guardiola's side under constant pressure, maybe lacked the usual energy he possesses, covered ground whenever he could, but didn't have any goal scoring opportunities. So obviously I did touch before we talked about Puncheon on the sort of formation we played, and obviously we did start the game playing the 4-3-3 formation. Obviously James McArthur in this game was playing a lot more deeper than he has in past games, because, you know, it was a little bit of a change of formation, and his hesitancy for the first goal, you know, when he has the ball, instead of just trying to do a slick pass or trying just to pass it out to another player, try and get dribbled past the player, he should have just, instead of hesitating, he should have just whipped the ball up the air, up the field, and cleared the danger. And there is a saying, if in doubt, hoof it out. In this occasion, he would have done that, because that would have been a lot better. And yes, he would have been, you know, he was under pressure, he was caught in possession, having the ball, he had to think quickly. But at the end of the day, you can't just dribble out of danger. Sometimes, like I said, if in doubt, hoof it out. He should have just hoofed it out the pitch, maybe taken a throw in, and then defended that one. So, you know, the fact that he was hesitant didn't really help his performance, and that was the low point of his performance. The fact that he hesitated when the ball was going to him, and instead of, you know, blocking it or clearing it, he tried to dribble past the player, and ultimately that led to us conceding the goal. But, you know, much like the other players, and the reason I've given him the 7 is he kept Pep Guardiola's side under constant pressure. And obviously we know, having seen them play this season, and the fact that they put 3 goals past the best team in the world, Barcelona, we can see that Pep Guardiola's side are set up to put teams under constant pressure. But we matched them. In this game, we matched them for energy and for the pressure. And, you know, McArthur was quite crucial to that. He kept, you know, running at players, trying to tackle players, trying to, you know, make them be caught in possession like he was. And, you know, although he did lack his usual energy that he had, he still was able to try and match Pep Guardiola's side for pressure. And, you know, if you look at the stats throughout the game, I think it was James McArthur, Yohan Cabaye and Jason Puncheon, so the 3 midfield players, they ran the most of any other player in the game. And I don't know whether it's just Man City players and Palace players, or whether it's just Palace players, but that stat just shows that the midfield 3 kept running throughout the game. And obviously James McArthur, he covered a lot of ground and done whatever he could. And obviously the final thing really about him, I talked about this already, where he was playing more defensive in the formation, he didn't really have any goal scoring opportunities. He didn't have the chance to go forward and try and, you know, get ahead on the ball, or whether it would be, you know, trying to run into the box and have a shot. But obviously in this game, he didn't really have any clear goal scoring opportunities. And like I said already, that's just purely because of the position he was playing. Obviously James McArthur, the reason I've given him a 7 is, yes, he had a bit of hesitancy and, you know, shouldn't have really been doing that for the first goal. He should have just cleared it. He did once again show how his performance, or how he can help the team to match teams like Pep Guardiola with his pressure. And although he didn't have as much energy as he normally had, he did show glimpses of what his high press game can do to players when you can catch them out of possession. Obviously moving on to the final midfield 3, and obviously another hot contender for the Man of the Match award, which is Yohan Cabaye, who I'm going to give an 8. A man of the match performance from the Frenchman saw him work tirelessly to win back possession and link up Palace's midfield and attack. It was arguably his best all-round performance since he signed for the club last season. He looked good on the ball, tried to get it out wide and was tidy. No real chances to score though. So obviously, Yohan Cabaye, I've already said it, a man of the match performance. And you'll go on to hear about that in the man of match section. But once again, a very, very good performance from him. And, you know, he does really deserve the 8 he had. And obviously, he worked tirelessly on the board. And much like MacArthur, we're trying to match them for pressure, you know, trying to match Manchester City. You know, I think Yohan Cabaye was a classic example of that. And obviously, MacArthur didn't really have the usual energy he had, so he wasn't really doing it when he was off the ball. But when, well, Yohan Cabaye, he'd done that high press game when we were off the ball, and he worked tirelessly throughout the game. He didn't stop till the game ended, and he tried to win back possession when he could. And I talked about this in the formation setup, is the fact that, you know, the fact that we play this formation gives the defence more cover, the midfield more supply, and obviously the attack better supply and crosses. Obviously, Yohan Cabaye, a classic example of that. He linked up Palace's midfield and attack, whether it would be taking a pass and then distributing the ball through a cross or another pass, whether it be he would try and run through plays to make the space for someone else to shoot. So once again, you know, he's linking up with other players, which the new formation allows him to do. If it wasn't really for this formation, he probably would have been playing defensive, but this formation allows him to do defensive duties at one time, and then when he goes forward, he's doing very well. And the fact that he can link up the midfield where him, Punch and MacArthur are, with the attack, obviously trying to get crosses into them. And I've said this, and quite a few people actually said this on social media, that this was probably, arguably, his best performance since he signed for the club. And I personally probably have to agree with most people on that, because, you know, since he's come to the club, last season especially, he was playing more defensive role, but in this game with the new formation again, he's given the opportunity, the freedom to go forward and attack. And certainly we've now seen glimpses of why he is at the club, why we brought him to the club, because just his absolute pressure, his energy to the game was fantastic. And, you know, I've talked about Punch and being good on the ball. Yohan Cabaye, once again, good on the ball. You know, he gets the ball from the midfielder or from the defence into the midfield, whether it be find a pass to another midfielder, whether it be he rallied into space, whether it be he found the pass. Everything he done on the ball was very good. And I've said there already, he tried to get the ball out wide as much as he could, because obviously we've got talented wide men, so if you can get it to them, they can do skill, create more opportunities. So that he tried to do it as much as possible, and obviously that tactic, that quick distribution, ultimately led us to, you know, have more chances in the game. And another thing, he was very tidy. You know, he didn't make any sloppy passes like other players, didn't really give away possession too much, didn't really have a shot which, you know, then City would have counted on. So everything he done in the game was very good. And the final thing really, you know, if he had scored a goal, he probably would have got a 9. That would have topped off his performance. It would have been a cherry on the cake. But in this game, although he was being one of the most attacking threats, in the fact that he was supplying everyone else, like Zaha in most weeks, he wasn't looking to score himself, and ultimately that led to him having not many chances to score. So obviously, Yohan Cabaye, a well-deserved 8 for him. You know, man of the match performance from him, which saw him work tirelessly to try and win back possession. He linked up Palace's midfield and attack very well, and arguably his best performance since he joined for the club. And as with most of the midfield players, whether it be MacArthur, Punchin or Yohan Cabaye, you know, they all looked good on the ball and, you know, tried to distribute the ball as quickly as they could. Obviously, moving on now to the front three, obviously consists of Wilfried Zaha, Christian Benteke and Andros Townsend. Obviously, Wilfried Zaha, starting with him, I'm going to give an 8. It took Zaha some time to get going, but he did well in the second half with some excellent runs. His pass to Connor Wickham, perfectly weighted, allowed the striker to score, with another assist under his belt, and again for Wickham for one at Burnley 2 weeks ago. Maybe he didn't have a clean run up against a tough opponent in Kolarov, but it was a good battle. Obviously, Wilfried Zaha here, another high rating, another 8 for him, and once again he's showing his sort of more, his better performances he's got. He's been more consistent with the way he's playing this season, and although like many players, the first sort of say 10 minutes he was a bit sluggish on the ball, didn't really have any opportunities to score or to get crosses in. He didn't really have that much of an attacking presence. But you know, as with most players, in the second half he grew much more into the game and made some excellent runs down the flank. You know, try and get past his player in Kolarov, managed to get past the players on a few occasions, get some crosses in. Ultimately, a few of them, you know, resulted in shots or headers or things like that. You know, the fact that he's got this pace, this skill to run past players just shows what of an asset he is. And obviously, his pass to Connor Wickham, it was a perfectly weighted pass. It wasn't necessarily a cross because it was just about the right height and weight, so Wickham could get the ball, control it with his feet and strike in and score his goal, or his second goal, in 2 weeks running. And, you know, I've talked about this in the past. Wilfried Zaha, if you look at the statistics once again, he's got 5 assists under his belt. and that is the most of any English player in the Premier League. So if, you know, Gareth Southgate is listening to the podcast or looks at the statistics, I don't know why Wilfried Zaha isn't in the England squad, because the fact that he's got more assists than any other England player just shows how good he is this season. But much like the assist against last week against Burnley, a lovely, fantastic assist for him, and it just shows, you know, 2 weeks ago when he played Burnley, he was assisting, and now he can carry on that momentum he had from that game, from, you know, the fact that he got another assist to create another opportunity for another player. And most weeks, you know, we talk about Zaha, he needs to try and have a more end product, but he said this in an interview about 2-3 weeks ago. He's not looking for quantity, he's looking for quality. And in this game, a classic example, you know, whenever he crossed the ball, whenever he cut inside and had a shot, it was quality he was doing. It wasn't about how many balls he put into the area. But, you know, Kolarov isn't really the best, let's say, fullback in the league, so it wasn't really much of a challenge for him, but it was certainly a good battle. The fact that he had someone to compete with, to try and run past and things like that, and ultimately it made it hard for him. But obviously Wilfried Zaha, there's just the reason I've given him 7, and he is a hot contender for the man of the match, is the fact that out of the sort of the front three attacking players, he was the best attacking threat throughout the game. And although he started the game slow, he slowly grew into it, and just the excellent runs, the fact that he can run down the flank, run to the byline, get crosses in, make a pass, which he done to Wickham, all of this stuff all of this stuff we've done in the game just showed how much of an asset he is. And hopefully, if he continues this sort of very good, fine attacking form, hopefully he'll score more goals for us, get more assists, but hopefully get a sniff in the England squad. Obviously, moving on to the striker, Christian Benteke, who I'm going to give a 6. The service to him was lacking in the first half. Had a powerful header saved from 5 yards out, and really should have done better with that header that Claudio Bravo saved. It was a real chance you would have expected him to score from. So Christian Benteke here, the reason I've given him 6 is because he had a sort of average performance, and that's why I've given him that rating. And obviously, although he didn't really have any real clear-cut chances, let's say, throughout the game, we would have expected him to do better. But, you know, we can understand why he didn't really have that many chances, is the fact that he didn't really have any or too much service, especially in the first half. You know, I've said this already, in the first half, we're quite sluggish quite a lot of the time, and we don't really get going. And that meant that he didn't really get too much supply of the ball. But in the second half, there was a lot more supply to him and service, which meant he had a much better second half. And obviously, talking about service to him, one of the opportunities he had to score was a lovely cross from Zaha into the area, punching on the byline, whipped another cross into the area. Benteke, a lovely, fantastic, powerful header. Don't know how he got the power on it. Headed it down to Bravo. Bravo made an absolutely world-class save to just keep it out. And obviously Wilfried Zaha followed it up with a shot that got deflected wide. So once again, he's shown the attacking threat he got. And, you know, you would expect him to score from that. But when you've got a world-class keeper in Claudio Bravo and you've got a world-class striker, it sort of matches together. And someone's going to be on the right end of that. And obviously in that occasion, it was Bravo who made the wonderful save from what was a very wonderful header. But obviously, Christian Benteke, the reason I've given him 6 is, although he had bad service in the first half and it was lacking, let's say, in the game overall, he's still done whatever he could with the chances he had. And once again, the likes of Punchin, MacArthur Kabay, them sort of players supplying him, that sort of supply he gets, that sort of better supply, let's say, of the ball, and that control of the game, let's say, the possession, meant that he can take advantage of that and create many opportunities. But once again, I've said it already, it wasn't the most, it wasn't the most best performance, let's say. It wasn't the best performance from Benteke, but if the service had been better, I certainly could have seen him having a much more bigger impact on the game. But once again, I don't know how the hell he got that much power he did on the header which Claudio Bravo saved. Obviously, moving on now to the final player of the formation, that is Andros Townsend, who I'm going to give a 6. The winger really struggled to contribute, and it seems that in part because he'd rather play on the right wing. With Zaha doing so well at that position, he's having to make do on the left. Was substituted at half time with Palace going for a 4-4-2 formation. So obviously Andros Townsend here, this is sort of debatable one, because most people on social media once again would say he didn't really have that much of a good game. But I personally think I rated the way he played, the way he presented himself throughout the game. And although he did struggle throughout the game to try and contribute, the fact that he didn't make as many good runs he did as Zaha did, he didn't make as many crosses as Zaha did, you know, although he did struggle to do that, he did seem to do alright. And we have discussed this before, saying that he would rather play on the right wing, so that's probably why he isn't really putting that much effort in, because he would rather cut inside and shoot. But, you know, Zaha's doing fantastic on the right wing, so we've got to try and adapt Townsend to play on the left wing, because we know he can put crosses in from the left. We know he can cut inside from the left and shoot with his right foot instead. So what we've got to see from him is he's got to try and adapt to play on that role, because we know that Wilfried Zaha is significantly better on the other role. And that's why, you know, when you've got a player performing as well as Zaha's doing, you've got to try and do even better to get into that. Sorry, you've got to try and do even better to get into that position. Obviously, Andros Townsend isn't doing that. And obviously, I've said this already. Zaha is doing fantastic on the right, so he's got to try and make do on the left, and he did that in parts of the game. You know, although he didn't get crosses in the area, he didn't really have any shots as he usually did. He'd try and link up with the midfield or whether it be the attacker to try and get the ball and try and create opportunities. So all in all, it wasn't that much of a terrible performance from him, and although he did struggle in parts of the game, he did have an alright performance. And obviously, he was taken off at half-time, and that is the question I want to ask for this podcast. Once again, he got taken off. Palace went to the 4-4-2 formation, and once again it worked. Wickham playing off sort of Christian Benteke once again worked to our benefit, because it meant that we had two strikers up front, which meant the one striker was less isolated, because you had two strikers against two defensive midfielders, and it also meant that you got more wide men, which means they can get the ball into the area. And that's the question I want to ask for this pod again. Having seen Palace play the 4-4-2 for the last two games, and the fact that it's worked, the fact that it's made an impact, can we see, or should we play that game again, or that formation against Swansea this weekend? Because that 4-4-2 formation with two strikers, with Wickham and Benteke, could really help us to get a result against Swansea. Obviously, you know, now to move on to the three substitutions. Obviously, Connor Wickham, Lee Chun-Yong and Bakary Sakho. So obviously, of the substitutions, don't normally give ratings to people who were not on the pitch long enough to make an impact. Obviously, Bakary Sakho, I'm not really going to give him a rating because he was brought on from Martin Kelly late on in the game. Played at left back, which admittedly, where he's quite physical, he done a lot more better than Kelly did for the whole sort of 85 minutes. But, you know, he didn't really make a difference to the outcome. You know, we were 2-0, 2-1 down at the time, so he wasn't at fault for anything, but then didn't have the impact which you would expect from a substitution. Obviously, Connor Wickham, I'm going to give him a 7, because obviously he scored the goal and formed a fantastic partnership with Christian Benteke. And Lee Chun-Yong, I am going to give a 6. So just to discuss them briefly, and I did say this at the beginning, if you do accept my challenge and write down all of the players, giving them ratings from 1 to 10, then obviously put the substitutions as well, because, you know, we want to see how much of an impact they had when coming off the bench. Obviously, Connor Wickham, as with the performance at Burnley, Wickham made a telling contribution. His goal was a well-taken effort, and he combined well with Christian Benteke to pull City's back line under pressure. Why not try playing him and Benteke together? So once again here, I'm bringing up the question, why couldn't we play him and Benteke together? Because I think that'll be a fantastic partnership. And I've talked about it before, you know, when you play with one striker, they're going to feel quite isolated, because most teams play with two centre-backs, so you've got one person, one striker playing against two centre-backs, so they're under quite a lot of pressure. But when you play the 4-4-2 or whatever formation you do with two strikers, it means that the striker, there's two of them, which means, you know, one can play off of the other, and it means that it puts the backline under pressure, because instead of having one person or two people defending off one person, you got two people trying to defend off two people who are playing off of each other, passing balls to each other, which ultimately puts them under pressure. And like with Burnley, we talk about a super sub, the word that we don't use very often, because, you know, sometimes subs just come on for fitness reasons. This was the classic example or the definition of a super sub. You know, he came on to do a job, he'd done that with a very powerful strike. And I've looked back at the replay, you know, Claudio Bravo, Man City fans would probably be expecting him to do better with that effort, you know, whether it be get his hands out to block it. But, you know, it was a very powerful strike from Connor Wickham right into the goal, and it was a very fantastic, well-taken effort. But once again, the question's raised. Can him and Benteke play together? And I'll put that to you in the comments below, but I certainly think they should do that together, because with them playing off of each other, it puts one of them under less pressure, and it means they can create more opportunities. Obviously, just to touch on Lee Chun-Yong for a little bit, he didn't really make that much of a contribution into the game, and he was only brought on for Benteke midway through the second half. I think it was mainly for fitness reasons, because you've got a player like Benteke playing sort of 100%, his fitness is going to go down, so you bring on Lee Chun-Yong just to conserve the fitness of the player, but he didn't make the significant contribution which you would have expected him to do. Obviously, you know, they're all the players now, so there's been quite a lot of mixed player reviews. Obviously, the defence were absolutely abominable again. They were making too many mistakes, a lack of communication once again from them. But unlike the last few weeks, they were significantly better than they've been in past weeks. And obviously, the midfield, once again, playing very well, supplying the attackers and also giving cover to the backline. And obviously the attack, once again, being fantastic, getting crosses into the strikers scoring goals. And, you know, Wilfried Zaha, I have to say it again, 5 assists, one of the top in the Premier League. So surely, you know, something's got to happen to him. But obviously, like I've done this in a few years, I've sort of given rankings to the sort of positions in the pitch. So obviously the sort of goalkeeper and defence, I'm probably going to give them a 6, or yeah, 5/6. So maybe a 5.5, because I think they've done alright throughout the game. You know, they didn't do anything really wrong other than the 2 goals we conceded. So they were a bit slacky goals, let's say. But other than that, they didn't do anything wrong. The midfield, once again, high press game, working really well for us. They're supplying the attackers, probably a 7. And obviously the attack, maybe an 8 for the midfield, because, you know, give them credit. They were doing as much as they could to supply the players. And obviously the attack, once again, I'll probably give them a 7, because when they had opportunities, when they had chances coming in from the midfield and the wingers, they done whatever they could with it. But all in all, a very decent performance from Palace going forward. But once again, we are very frail at the back. So now to move on to the Man of the Match award. But before I do that and give you my Man of the Match, who I thought had the biggest influence in the game, it's now to move on to the Twitter poll. So obviously the 4 nominations for this week's Man of the Match award was Yohan Cabaye, Jason Puncheon, Wilfried Zaha and Connor Wickham. So if you do want to vote in next week's Man of the Match poll, then do go and follow my own personal Twitter account, which is at the CPC podcast. So obviously Crystal Palace don't post this weekly poll giving the Man of the Match, but if you do want to vote in it and have your opinion heard in next week's Man of the Match section of the podcast, then obviously do go and give me a follow. And obviously, similar to the Crystal Palace accounts on Twitter and Facebook, I do regularly update it with the latest news. So once again, if you do want to keep updated with all the latest ongoings with the club, then obviously my Twitter account is the place to go. So once again, at Crystal Palace. So I might as well start by giving you the results. Obviously, starting in 4th place with 11% of the votes was Connor Wickham. Closely followed in 3rd place with 16% of the votes, Wilfried Zaha, which means 2nd place and runner-up with this week's Man of the Match award is Jason Puncheon with 17% of the votes, which means the winner of this week's Man of the Match award for the game against Manchester City is Yohan Cabaye with an impressive over 50% of 56% of the votes. So congratulations, Yohan Cabaye. You don't get a trophy or a certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was a very, very solid attacking performance by you. But obviously now I'm just going to go over why I've sort of given each of the players, or why I've nominated each of the players. And obviously you've heard this in the player rankings already, so I'm just going to briefly go over each player and then give you who I thought had the biggest influence of the game. And most weeks I go with a poll, and I will give you a sort of teaser already. I'm probably going to go with the poll again. Obviously Yohan Cabaye, the reason I've given it to him, obviously I gave him an 8 in the player rankings. He was one of the best attacking threats throughout the game. He was connecting the defence, the midfield and the attack together. He had biggest attacking influence in the game. He controlled the rhythm of the game, the pace of the game. He was always finding passes, finding shots, or trying to supply other players, and he had an overall good control of the game. Obviously, in that sort of midfield 3, he occasionally went back and defended, and that's why I put him on there. That the energy he put into the game, the fact that he controlled the way the game went, is why I've put him on there. Obviously, Jason Puncheon, very similar to Yohan Cabaye, played in very similar positions throughout the game until Jason Puncheon changed. But, you know, once again, both of these players had a very good energy about their game, constantly putting in 100% effort to try and get the ball off the players, try and get passes. And that's what they've done. You know, they were connecting the midfield to the attack by finding passes, finding crosses, and trying to link up the play. Obviously, Wilfried Zaha, once again, on the wing, one of the best attacking threats from Palace, kept running down the flanks, running to the byline, getting crosses into the area. Obviously got the lovely assist for Connor Wickham's goal, a lovely weighted pass to him. So once again showing the quality he's got both going forward and attacking, getting crosses in, but but also showing a little bit more of his end product, let's say. The fact that instead of just crossing the ball in, he can find a perfectly weighted pass as well. Obviously moves me on nicely to the 3rd nomination. Obviously Connor Wickham, the reason I put him on there, you know, if you ever needed a definition of a super sub, Connor Wickham is your man. You know, he came on the pitch, we changed the formation up to a 4-4-2, and he straight away goes and scores. You know, he managed to control the ball from Wilfried Zaha, take it down, and put a lovely, powerful shot into the goal. So obviously they're the 4 nominations, but, you know, like I said, congratulations Yohan Cabaye, and I am going to give it to him because, you know, congratulations, you win my man of match and the Twitter poll. But, once again, his high press, his energy he had to the game, the fact that he could find a pass, the fact that he could, try and link up play is why I've put him on there. And that's why I've put him above all players. Because, yes, Jason Puncheon done that. But when he got moved out wide, he didn't really have the opportunity to do that more. And he was more crossing the ball in. But Yohan Cabaye he dictated the way the game went, the pace of the game, and also, like I said already, he was able to find passes. But, congratulations to Yohan Cabaye. He did have he had an outstanding performance, which was slightly above the others. But, you've got to put credit to, both Puncheon, Wilfried Zaha, and Connor Wickham as well, because their influence in the game also helped us. Because like Cabaye, they were putting in 100%, and obviously doing what they had to do. Obviously, Puncheon being the high press game, linking players up, Wilfried Zaha being the attacking threat, and Connor Wickham being the impact sub. But obviously, if you do want to vote in next week's one, like I said, do go along to my Twitter account where you can follow it there. And obviously, if you do disagree with who I thought the man of the match was, then of course go in the comments below. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings, and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got an exclusive interview with Alan Pardew and James Tompkins following the game.
James, the players obviously must be gutted after that, but is it positive that you managed to match them for so much of the game?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just a matter of seeing it out, and taking a point. It didn't quite happen for us today, and obviously the corners are, it seemed like a sloppy area really, but these things are obviously costing us at the minute, and they weren't obviously at the start of the season, so it's obviously changed around a little bit. But obviously the lads are disappointed in there, and rightly so. But obviously, like you say, we matched them throughout really. You managed to keep the strikers, Aguero in particular, quiet today. What were they like to play against? Yeah, no, obviously they change movement a lot. It's not just Aguero. Obviously they change it with De Bruyne and obviously Sterling, obviously running in behind myself. They will keep changing the players, and that's what they're good, rotating system and that. So it was obviously had to be on our toes today. We dealt with them for long periods of the game, and didn't really have any efforts on the goal really. Connor Wickham came on at half time. Second time he's come on as sub. He's really pushing for a place now, isn't he? Yeah, no, he's obviously shows that he's a handful, strong lad, and keeping the ball for us, which he's done a good job for us today and got the goal. And obviously we couldn't make that count, and take the point with us, and it's disappointing. A lot's been made of the defence just of recently, but do you feel like there was a step up today to recent games? Yeah, I think so. I think we looked a lot more solid today than they've been in times and other games, and hopefully it's just obviously learning myself with partnership wise, and obviously if Scotty, I've only played with him maybe once or twice, so it's just obviously keeping going, playing games, and getting used to the other players. And finally, we had the tribute before the game. After the recent tragedy in the community, it was a great display from the fans, wasn't it? Yeah, no, it was much respected by both sets of fans, and we obviously appreciate that. And unfortunately, we couldn't get a good result from them today, and obviously our thoughts are still with everyone and their families. A close game today, went right down to the wire. Get your thoughts on it. Yeah, there's two poor goals for us to concede, and we've got to stop conceding those goals. And it was a hard-fought game. We was a lot tighter defensively. Obviously, they're world-class defenders, so our threat was somewhat subdued. But that was the quality of the opposition more than anything. I'm gutted for our fans today. I think we wanted to give them something and couldn't quite do it. And some really good spells. Is that a positive that you can match a team like Man City? Yeah, but we know that, I think. I'm just frustrated that with the two goals, really, they're really poor goals. The second one, we just got disorganised. The messages didn't get on the pitch that should have got on the pitch. And it's cost us a goal. At the other end of the pitch, Connor Wickham's come on, scored again, second game in a row off the bench. Got some good options up at that end. Yeah, of course. And there was some great displays today. I thought Puncheon, MacArthur and Cabaye in particular were terrific. The two centre halves looked good. And everywhere else, so we was okay, but it wasn't enough. And away from the match, it was a day of the community coming together. It's fair to say that the fans did the club proud today. Absolutely. It was a horrible week for us. People who live in and around Croydon and the people who support us. And we wanted to give them something. Unfortunately, we couldn't, but of course, we did everything else correctly, and particularly our fans who were exemplary.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Alan Pardew and James Tompkins had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Manchester City. but make sure to come back next week for my post-match review of the game against Swansea. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.